Hi, y'all. Welcome to this week's episode. I'm bringing in one of, if not the most generous people that I personally know. Her name is Diane Perkins, and she leads a life that is committed to extravagant generosity. And I just felt like this would be such a cool episode to just focus in on how do we live as generous people? What is it like to be an outwardly focused person? How do we best exemplify Jesus in how we are generous, not just with our money, but with our time, with our energy, with our resources? And so I'm bringing on someone who I think is the leading force of this whole, what I'm hoping will become a generosity movement where we learn to not just look at ourselves and focus on ourselves and obsess over ourselves, but look outwardly. Because if you've been alive long enough, I'm 42 years old now, that's the best way to live. So enjoy this really encouraging and really amazing story from my friend, Diane Perkins. Okay, everyone, welcome to this week's episode. I've got, I don't know, maybe one of my top encouragers in life in the studio with me today. And the studio is totally broken down because we're moving buildings, but you can bring family into these broken down spaces and they don't judge you. I have Diane Perkins with me, and we can talk about 1,000 things. But I specifically want to talk about generosity and living generously, which I know is your entire passion in life. And I'm just so excited because a little background on us before I let you start answering my questions. A little background on us for the listeners is Diane has been, how long have you been at the church?
Only since the summer of 2017 after my divorce.
2017. Okay, so you came right after your divorce.
A year after.
Okay. So we've known you since then, and Diane has been just the most consistent, faithful, encouraging woman of God. I mean, I can't even tell you. And so I'm so excited that we get to talk and give the listeners a glimpse into, because I think sometimes, well, you know me, so you know how it can be like people see an outside picture, right? Mm-hmm. They see what looks like a success. They see what looks like a platform. They see what looks like a microphone. They see what looks like money. They see what looks like a good job. They see all these things, and there's nothing wrong with any of those things. But you know the heart of this podcast, which you've championed from day one, is I want to get behind that. You know, I want to get behind the thing of, yes, I'm a generous person. And what brought you to where you live so outrageously generous, it makes me nervous for you.
It scares me sometimes.
Yeah, it does. Yeah. But I know that about you. And so I want to like just backtrack a little bit before we get to like where you are now, because there are so many amazing things about your life and your story. But I just want to hear a little bit about your start with specifically in becoming, and you're not, and when I say generosity, and you can probably speak to this, I'm not just talking money.
Right.
You know, and you're generous in.
Money's just the byproduct.
That's it.
Of generosity.
Yeah.
It's totally different than money.
Say a little bit more about that.
Well, I think in my mid-30s, I'll be 62 in a few weeks. So a while back, I really got filled with the Spirit of the Lord. And the Lord took me to a real radical place of obedience. And during that time, I lost my job. And I was married at the time, putting him through school. I had been in a multi-year lawsuit against my daughter's father, and he had just given up his rights to her, so we gave up child support.
Oh, man.
I was putting my husband through college, and I got fired for being a Christian.
Oh, wow.
And at that point, the Lord said to me, do you trust me or do you not? And I'd always given. We gave as kids. We got little little envelopes, and we gave. My parents tithed. I was Catholic, but we tithed very strong.
Yep.
And at that point, the Lord just set me down and said, if you trust me, you're going to tithe on your unemployment. Oh. And that's where it started. Because I used to, before that time, I would work little games with God. Like, okay,
oh, yeah, we do that.
If I could do the net, and okay, let's figure what the net is. And if I give this much, that'll be enough.
Save $25 here.
Oh, it was horrible. Yeah. And it was a place of bondage because you're not really giving out of your heart. Yep. And the Lord just ripped all that away from me and just showed me from that point forward who he was.
Why do you think you were willing to hear him in that spot? Because you're dealing with Heather's father. You're dealing with putting your husband, the husband, the time through college. You just got fired, and all of a sudden now you're like, God gets through.
What else is there? I mean, there's nothing else but God. And it really changed my life. The things the Lord taught me during that time are silly and crazy. So just as a little backstory.
Yes, tell me the backstory. Yeah,
my family is from Stanton, Texas, which is a farming and ranching community. Yep. I was born just west of Stanton in Midland, Texas. Yep. And when I was 2, we moved to Lubbock, and that's where I was raised. And when I was 6.5 years old, my mother was diagnosed with terminal cancer. And they came to us. That about you. What? Yeah. Oh. And they told us that she would not live 3 months. Oh. My mother's family was very godly family. My dad's family, there was divorce in the family. His mother had married a man older, like 20 some odd years older. Okay. And his son was about the age of my grandmother. So my uncle. Wow. And my dad had 2 older sisters. He was the baby, and he had to quit college to take care of the family. So, my dad was born in 1931, so Depression baby. And my mother's family was well off. And so when my mom got cancer, my dad retired when he was about 35 years old to take care of my mother. And their corporation took care of us. My mother's family supported our family. Yeah. Well, during that time, my dad would do things like, back then you didn't have liquid soap. You had bars of soap. Yeah. And the little bars of soap would get about as big as a quarter. And he would save those. And then he would use these cups that you do cupcakes in. Yeah. And he would melt them.
And put them all together.
And put them all back together to make soap again. Oh, wow. He was so frugal. It was like a spirit of poverty. Wow. Another thing that Daddy did that the Lord showed me was one day I was going to mail a letter. And my dad, whenever an envelope would come, if it didn't have the cancellation on the stamp, he would peel the stamp off and use it again. Well, as a kid, I just thought that's what you do.
You just reuse stamps.
And one day, during this time, the Lord was giving me, a real test of obedience. Yep. Literally, I went to take the stamp off, and it was like electricity hit me, and I stopped. And the Lord said, "That's stealing."
Oh, wow.
And I'm in my head going, "It is?" I had no idea. And the Lord said, "If you're going to be obedient to me, you need to know what right is from wrong." Wow. And so there was just so many things like that the Lord would tell me, "Go take that grocery cart and put it back." It wasn't even my grocery cart.
The little things.
He said, "If you'll be obedient in little, you will be given much, because you have to be obedient."
And this is before you had much.
Oh, yeah. I had nothing. Yeah. And I would pick up trash on the street.
Would you really?
I would never throw out a piece of gum on the highway, of the car window. And the Lord just brought me to this place of such radical obedience. Yeah. And the other thing the Lord showed me was that when you get to the end of the toothpaste, you don't have to cut it open and peel it back and pull the toothpaste out. Because that's a spirit actually of greed. Yeah. Oh. Poverty and greed are very similar. Avarice and greed. Oh, that's never enough.
Like humility and confidence are the same in good ways.
Yes.
Yeah. That's so interesting.
So I was radical for God, and so many miracles happened during that time.
As a girl?
During my obedience
During the
run.
Okay, during the test. During the test. Okay.
And I'd always driven a luxury car. Literally in the same week. Yeah. And at that time, our house payment was $680.
Okay.
And that was a lot of money in the 80s, Yeah. And during that week, I got a $400 coupon to go drive a Lexus and a $200 coupon to go test drive a Navigator. We literally went down and test drove both cars and got $600. $100 gift card showed up in my mailbox to Brookshire's. It was a grocery store at the time that was there. I don't even know if they still have any around here, but things like that started happening. Stuff started showing up at my house out of nowhere. We still don't know where all of it came from. And the Lord carried us through that whole time. Oh my goodness. And what's interesting is the day I got fired from that job, which is another backstory. So I started in the insurance industry out of college. I worked for Aetna, which had a casualty company at the time for 15 years. From Aetna, I went to their company called Structured Benefits, Inc., and it was a structured benefits company. And I was vice president of that company when I was 30 years old. And my career skyrocketed in structured settlements. Well, in 1996, Aetna sold SBI. So I went to work for the largest structured settlement broker in the country. I had an opportunity to go anywhere because I was the first woman in the industry. I was very successful. I had
it all.
Great
You were on the fast track.
reputation across the country. So I went to work for a guy, and then my mother was diagnosed with cancer again. So I literally worked 4 days a week, and I would go to Lubbock for, I'd work Monday through Thursday, leave Thursday night, and I'd be there till Sunday night. I did that for 3 months till my mom died. Well, that guy that I worked for stole a bunch of my commissions, and he did a lot of things, wouldn't let me go out when the brokers that I'd been in, relationship with for years from the life companies, he would say, "Oh, it's boys' night out."
Sure.
So I quit him. And I had a 1-year non-compete.
Okay.
So I quit, went to work at an insurance company as a claim manager, got hired. And I said to the guy, "Hey, I have a trip to Israel in 3 weeks." And he goes, "That's okay. You take 2 weeks off, come in for a week, then take 2 weeks and come back." I'm like, "Okay."
Great.
So I negotiated that. When I came back from that trip, they had moved that claim manager to another office, and I had a new claim manager. Well, long story short, after 11 months, we had an audit, passed the audit better than we'd ever had, ever. And we had a celebratory steak dinner, and it was on youth night. And my ex-husband was in school at night. My daughter went to youth, so I had to have someone take her, but I had to pick her up. And I left the steak dinner after we ate. Well, the next morning I came in, and I was told I wasn't a team player because I didn't go out for drinks. And he just reamed me, and that was on a Thursday. On Friday morning, I went in at 6:30, and he fired me. Now, what's interesting is I was there 11 months. I'd already taken 2 weeks vacation for Israel. He gave me a 2-month severance, which makes no sense because I didn't earn it. And the day I was fired, I got a job back in the structured settlement industry. And within the first year, the Lord told me that that was my year of Jubilee. And I had, back in that time, a lot of money. It was about $250,000 in legal debt.
Wow.
Against my daughter's father. He had abused her, and we went to court over it and got him out of her life.
Good.
That year, I broke every sales record in structured settlements. And in the year 2000, I paid off every debt we had.
Oh, my God.
I paid off all the legal debt.
Wow.
And still had money left over.
Wow.
And it was the Lord. It was totally the Lord. I went from, paying minimums on credit cards and, juggling money.
And growing up with your dad melting soap down. To total favor. Unexplained favor.
Because I tithed.
Do you think that's why?
Oh, I know.
Everybody's going to think I know that's because I pastor a church. I'm not.
I know that's why.
Really.
It's all God's, Jamie. Once we get that it's all His.
And I mean, we tithe. I believe in the tithe.
I do too.
We give. We try. You inspired us actually because you said you always up every year what you tithe, and so Dustin and I started doing that too. And so even this month, I was paying the tithe, and I was like, oh, that's right. No, and you were an inspiration for that because we tithe back too. Even though we get paid from the church, it comes through us and then it needs to go back. Because it's such an important releasing of, okay, take me back to the test. Okay, before I get to the favor and all of the incredible things that you can now do for people. The testing time where God's saying to you, you don't have money at this point. And He says, tithe on your unemployment.
There's a huge story in that one.
I'm sure.
But one thing the Lord showed me, my mom would always say, Diane, be otherly. That was her word. You need to be otherly. And so one thing my mom always did was she wrote notes and wrote letters. And so the Lord told me that when you're down or you're depressed, pull out your note cards and write somebody a note to encourage them. And that's generosity.
Yes, it's more about the money. This is where that comes into play.
Okay, so generosity is generous of your spirit.
Of your spirit.
So when I'm
this.
low,
This is so good.
Because tithing, we plant a seed. And, the Bible tells us so many times about tithing. It's the only place there's a test, and the Bible gives us a promise that as you give, it will be given to you.
Yep.
You don't do it to get, but if you do have a generous spirit, you will always be prosperous. That's a promise in Proverbs. I think the 11th chapter somewhere. And what my mom always said was, Diane, always give of yourself. If you don't have anything else to give of yourself. So I ended up being on staff of a church. I started their singles program. I worked 30 hours a week there, was a single mom, working a full-time job. I tithed 100% of what I earned at that church back to the church. And it was just being otherly. Phone calls to friends, little note cards. And now it's easy because you can just send a text.
Right. Yeah. And that still rings so true in your life. Like you're so otherly. Like, yes, you can give money. Yes, you can. But it is so far beyond that. Like you are in Dallas at our Dream Center.
I love that Dream Center.
Yeah, I know you do. But you give your time. You give your wisdom. You sit and pray, with people. You get to know, like you recruit volunteers from the line. That was so awesome. Our last adopted blog, Ms. Diane had somebody come through our line for food, and they were so blessed. They were like, "What was that?" She said, she
gave $10 because she wanted to plant a seed.
Oh my
She
gosh.
went in her purse,
I didn't know this.
And she gave a $10 bill.
What?
And I put it in an envelope with a note and turned it in Sunday. And she said, "I want to be a part of this Dream Center." And it was all she had in her billfold, and she gave it.
Oh my gosh! Isn't it wild how God brings you're a magnet for people who are going.
Well, God's a magnet.
Yes.
We're all magnets.
Yes, we are.
It's nothing special about me. We are all magnets.
Yep.
We either turn it to magnetize or turn it to repel.
Yeah. Isn't that the truth?
Yes. So you can either
this is great.
do what God is going to do through you and pour it out.
Yep.
Because he'll always pour it back.
Yes.
Always.
Did you know that deep down? Did you really believe it, or did it take some pouring out to really realize oh my goodness, God is faithful. He really does. Or did you do it? I'm kind of wanting a statistic, how much faith.
A lot of it was watching my mother.
Okay.
My mom had cancer.
Sounds amazing.
She was only supposed to live 3 months.
When you were 6, right?
I was 6 and a half. She lived 30 years. And back then they didn't have chemo. They had cobalt.
Okay.
So she had a radical mastectomy. They wanted to take her sternum. Daddy wouldn't let them. And they painted brown like a map on her. And I was so young, they didn't let me see her.
Yeah.
But I would go. We went to Scott and White Hospital in Temple from Lubbock.
Yep.
That was, at that time, the premier cancer place. And I would go with my dad and stay at the Ponderosa Motel. And there was an old couple, the Venables, who taught me how to do ceramics. And they would kind of take care of me during the day while Daddy was at the hospital. So one day I got to go in and see my mom on the TV. And she was on the bed with her drawing, her tattooed drawings on her. And then they brought that machine down on her and did cobalt treatments. And I watched that. It was like the lamb to the slaughter.
Yeah.
It was like Abraham and Isaac. I mean, it was just, my mother was the most wonderful woman. She was very proper, very prim, debutante, sorority girl. My grandmother was a college graduate back in the
Which was
huge. My grandmother, my mom's mom, she actually played at the Metropolitan Opera. She taught China painting lessons. I worked my first job at a bank, and this older woman did China painting. We got to talking, and she took lessons from my grandmother. And my grandmother was a gardener, which is why I went to Master Gardener School, because my grandmother really connected with just beauty and nature.
Yes, nature.
And I feel a connection to her even today when I'm in my yard. And I love being outside with just beauty of nature. Because God just speaks to me through that.
Yep.
But my grandmom, my mother's mother, was left-handed, and they taught her to be right-handed.
Oh, interesting.
So she was ambidextrous.
Uh-huh.
I'm left-handed.
Really?
And very left-handed.
Uh-huh.
I don't do
There's
much
no
with,
right.
No. I do shoot a gun right-handed. That's one thing I do.
I've seen that happen.
Yeah, the only thing I do is shoot a gun. But other than that, I do everything left-handed. But my grandmother was just the most gracious woman.
Huh.
She played the organ for the church. She played the piano. She taught my dad piano lessons when he was a little boy.
Oh, my goodness.
And my mom ended up marrying him.
Wow.
Yeah. So my mother came from that, and my grandmother in Stanton, Texas, I didn't know this till after my mom died. So a friend of mine, we never really knew a lot of stories about my mother because she was always so darn perfect.
Yeah. Oh.
You just, my dad, you could hear 100 of everything he did. And so family friend, Hope Pretty, I'm going to see him in 2 weeks. He's 89 now.
Oh.
He and my mother had dated as teenagers, and he was my dad's best man.
How
and Dad
cute.
was his best man.
Oh, that's so cute.
And Hope gave me the name of a lady that knew my mom.
Okay.
And after Mom died, I called up Sue and I said, "Can you tell me any wild stories about my
Give me
mother?"
one. Just give me one.
Well, one was they were driving home from North Texas down to Stanton, and Mother was speeding. And so she got there too early. So they stopped at the DQ in town off I-20 to wait because she knew she'd get in trouble. And my granddaddy drove by in his pickup truck and she got in trouble. And I thought, is that it?
That's it.
But what Sue told me was, she said, "But Diane, you need to understand your grandmother." And I said, because she had passed away when I was 13. And she said, "Listen, I was Church of Christ.
Mm-hmm.
Your grandmother put money into our church, the Baptist church, the Methodist church, and a Presbyterian church because they had money. And your grandmother wanted every church to do well in the town."
I did not know this was in your blood.
Yeah, my grandmother was a real big giver,
Really?
and just a generous spirit. And my mom,
oh my gosh, she just loved the church and the
she loved
kingdom
the
of
Lord.
God so much. Yeah, she just anybody who's doing His work is going to get blessed by her.
Yeah. I never knew that till my mom died.
Oh my
and
gosh.
my mother's hands were all crippled up, and from cobalt, she had nerve damages, and her right arm wrist was as big around as like your calf or your thigh.
Yeah.
And she would go to the hospital, and she was a pink lady. She would push that cart around and take flowers as crippled up as she was.
She really?
She served.
Otherly.
Very otherly. Mm-hmm.
Wow. So when you were going through all of this and you're tithing off your unemployment, and did things get better?
Oh no.
That's what I knew. I didn't know the answer to that, but I assumed the answer to that.
It was rough.
Talk about that, because this is where I feel like sometimes like we get into like these pickles with God, where it's like you were talking the games. You know, we negotiate. We think we can compromise or whatever. You know,
and I'll tell you, there is no compromise. You're either in or you're out. And I want to know that when they see me, they know I'm a Christian. I don't want there to be a doubt.
Yeah. So during this like first season of kind of like testing, and when things didn't get better, because obviously like the marriage ended in divorce.
Well, that was 25 years
later.
Yeah, that was probably 20 years later.
Oh, okay. So this was a long time ago.
This was a long time ago.
This was when you were young.
I was in my 30s. So what happened was, I can remember there was like a week, you know, where the enemy comes and there's a siege.
Oh, yes.
So I remember within a day or two, it's like a country western song. So my washing machine went out. My dishwasher went out. Our air conditioner went out. I'm not kidding you.
I believe it.
And then I sat down in a chair and the chair broke. And it was an old metal chair, these little parlor chairs I'd had forever. And they'd been repainted so many times, and the weld had finally broken. And I just said, "God, what are you doing to me? God, are you there?"
Right. Because you're trying to obey.
Yeah.
You're passing the test, and nothing's getting better. And slapped and slapped and slapped.
It's like being in the wave, and you're slapped down, and you get up, and you're slapped down, and you get up. And the Lord said, "Trust me."
Ugh.
Okay.
And you kept being generous.
Oh, yeah.
You never... that wasn't even a question. It was like almost completely removed from your brain.
I would be afraid not to tithe.
Okay.
I believe in it so strongly.
Really?
When God says, "Test me in this."
Yeah.
And Pastor Steve reminded me of something. Last year, I had COVID, as you know.
I know.
And I nearly actually died.
It was
from
very
COVID.
scary. Mm-hmm.
And so one night, I was laying in bed and I said, Lord, you're either going to take me and I'm going to praise you in heaven, or I'm going to wake up tomorrow and I'm going to praise you here on earth. I was so weak, so sick. And Pastor Steve called me out of the blue, and I picked up the phone and I'm like, hello, I was bad. And Pastor Truett, oh my gosh, that man saved my life 3 times over last year. From the flood of my house, literally taking me in and my dogs to taking care of me when I was sick.
Walked in the hospital.
Oh my goodness. And Dustin, he was outside the hospital in his car just praying for me, and we were just looking at him waving. It was just amazing. But
we weren't going to lose you.
No, Pastor Steve said, Diane, you need to understand something. He said, you tithe. And there's a promise in that tithe that God rebukes the devourer on your behalf. He said, so you need to understand you're not going to die. And I'm like, okay. I was out of fight.
You were so out of it.
And sometimes when you're out of the fight, there's others like you. I remember you sent me that pulse oximeter. I was like, what's that? And you're like,
I'm like, put it on your finger.
Your door.
You put it on your finger. You send me your number, girl.
Yeah. When it was in the 70s, that wasn't fun.
No.
But what that did was it gave me an empathy for others.
Yeah.
And I ended up buying an oxygenator machine, and I was able to give it to other people.
It's been passed.
It's
been passed.
I've never used it.
Where that is. That
I
machine.
bought it. I've never used it, but other
I keep
people
hearing
have
it.
been able to
This
use
is Diane's machine. This is Diane's machine. It's just going on everywhere around our the power of community and the power of
just showed me that this was for a reason. And so when things start happening and it's bad, you just have to say, okay, God, I know you're going to get me through the end of that. So during that time, within a few months, my ex-husband's dad died. He was diagnosed with cancer, died 13 days later. Oh, no. 3 months later, my mother died. Between that year of 12 months, we had 14 people that we either knew or were related to that died. Some were freak accidents. Like one guy was in a tractor rig and he got caught up in the column by, the tongs of the truck. Weird stuff. Literally, we didn't go over 3 weeks without another death. And it was like the year of death. We did things like I quit getting my nails done. I got rid of the maid. We got rid of cable TV. I mean, immediately. Making our own detergent. I mean, just stuff like that. I mean, just stuff I don't do.
Right.
We did.
Right. Oh, my goodness.
My ex-husband and my daughter mowed yards for money. Wow. Yeah.
And the whole time you're being, what was the word? Out otherly.
I mean, what else could you do?
Yeah.
You can't give anything other than what you've got.
Right. Well, okay. Yeah, that's great. You can't give anything other than what you've got. And I love that because I think sometimes people can look at extravagantly generous people, especially back to the finances, and feel like, well, I don't have $1 million. Or I can't write a $5,000 check, or I can't, but it's not about that. It's what the little steps of obedience. It's about being otherly. And so when you didn't you couldn't even afford the tithe and you were doing it. But I know you, so I would imagine you even 20 years ago were still finding ways to be in people's lives, to encourage people to show up at people's doorsteps.
I was doing prison ministry.
Of course you were. Yep. No surprise.
I was in this airport one day and there was a man I saw over at the phone bank, and the Lord told me to give all my money to him. And I did. And so the Lord was doing all these things that were just so bizarre.
Yep.
And God was just showing up. It was just amazing. But what I realized is when I started making $1 million a year, I had less joy. I had more headaches.
Really?
We fought over money.
Money became an issue.
Money was the everything. We were so materialistic. We traveled extravagantly all over the world, first class everywhere. We had a yacht. We had motorcycles. We had boats. We had house. We had whatever you want. We had it.
Yeah.
I was miserable. And then when I went through the divorce in 2016, I was going to keep my things that were fun. So
Your slingshot.
I bought a slingshot.
I remember
I'd had
that slingshot,
a T-Rex, and I'd had motorcycles. So I thought, well, I could do this by myself. So I bought a slingshot. And I had missed motorhoming. So I bought a motorhome. Then I bought a different motorhome a year later. And the Lord said, you don't own anything, Diane. It owns you.
Oh.
And I'm like, you're right, God, what do I do? And he said, sell it and plant seeds. I had more fun last year. I bought cars for people. I paid off 2 houses. I was able to bless people with just
way beyond the
college.
tithe. The tithe is like your baseline.
Oh, this is non-tax deductible stuff.
No,
this
you
is
don't
like
get tax deductions on these
not
ones.
even a tax deduction.
Oh.
So I worked to,
and you were living your best life doing this.
Gosh, I was having more fun.
Oh.
And what I do is
so
I can deduct 50% of my income. So every year I give 50% that I deduct. And then I pay tax on 40 and I live on 10%.
Yep.
And I always thought of J.C. Penney because he gave away 90%.
Oh, really?
By the time he died.
I didn't know that.
He was giving away 90%. Really? And so that, you can only deduct, sometimes I have to carry over to the next year. You can only deduct 50.
Yeah.
But I tell you, I gave away last year
a lot
of money that's not tax deductible. And it was so much fun. If your heart is open and your heart is willing, he takes what you have to find a way to glorify him with it.
That's right.
Now, I want to tell you about time that was very dark in my life.
Yep.
I'd been tithing for 10 years. I always tithed, but I'd been tithing on the gross without nickeling and diming God and giving offerings above the tithe. So I was living a generous life at that point.
Yep.
And my daughter and I had a kerfuffle, and my ex-husband really came between she and I in a lot of ways. And she didn't speak to me for 4 years. It was a very dark time. Now, how God works is pretty interesting because I partnered with Hope for the Heart. And we did a ride every year for pro-life called Ride for Life. And we donated money and we get donations for money. And one year, Jack McNary, dear friend, we did motorcycles in Europe with he and his wife all over Eastern Europe. And
so cool.
Just a great guy. And they always had a plaque with the mosaic broken window with the teddy bear design in it. Because, we're all broken and had a broken heart and how God fits it together and makes a mosaic.
Yeah.
They would give an award. So he's at this thing and I went and I was just depressed, felt like a horrible mother. Yeah. I was just barely functioning. Yeah. And the Lord said to me, Diane, if all you have to give, you need to smile. You have a beautiful smile, give. And so I would smile. And behind that smile, I was dying inside and just trying to smile. So Jack gets up and he's giving his award and he's telling about this person. And I'm like looking around the room and I'm like, who is he? And he never says male, female, just this person. I'm like, man, and I'm looking at all the people thinking, who is it? And then he said, we've never given this award, but this year we're giving the smile of the ride. Diane Perkins, you have this smile no matter what, you always smile. And I was like, I was bawling.
Oh, sure.
And I went up to accept I still have the plaque. I went up to accept it and told them the story. He had no idea.
He didn't know.
No, had no idea.
All that you were going through.
No. And so there was a big struggle between me and my dad a lot of my life. He was an alcoholic. He didn't bless me.
Yeah.
I don't have a story like a lot of people do. I've never taken drugs. I've never smoked a cigarette. Grew up around alcoholics. I've drank, but I don't drink now because I donated a kidney. So it's not worth it for the dehydration of it. But he was just a selfish man. I'd come home with straight A's and they just look at it and sign the report card. And my brother, the middle one that just died, he'd have 1 D, 2 C's, and a B, and they just praise him for that B. And I'm just like, what? Because they just knew Tom and I, my oldest brother and I were both very smart, and grades came easy for us.
Yeah.
And so there was just this, and as a kid, when my mom got sick, I made this deal with God. So, when you don't know your theology or you're new as a Christian, you think you can make deals with God. And so I made a deal with God that if I would be perfect, Mom wouldn't die. And I think it took me till I was in my 30s to realize you don't make deals with God and you're not perfect as much as you try to be perfect.
Yeah, neither one was possible.
No, but we can't. It's God's grace is so free and, and we just have to accept it.
So
and we're
good.
saved, by faith through grace, or by grace through faith.
Yes.
That's we have to be saved. We don't do anything to earn it.
Yep.
And we can't earn it.
Yeah.
And growing up Catholic, a lot of our theology was on works, doing good works.
Yep.
And so you have to get that balanced,
yep.
And fast forward to when my dad died in 2000. My mother had died and my dad remarried, met a woman through a friend. She ended up stealing all our money. We had to sue her. We went all the way to the Supreme Court of Texas. Oh. We had to buy back our farm. No. Oh, it was a bad thing. And all the millions gone. Oh. And when he died, she wasn't there. My older brother was off looking for wills. Everybody was chasing the money. And nobody liked my dad because his nickname was the old fart.
Yeah.
His name was Fate, Fate.
Interesting.
And when he died, nobody wanted to be with him. So I went out of obedience. And the last thing my father ever said to me, he was in and out of terminal restlessness at the
hospice
the hospice place in Wichita Falls where his wife lived. He looked up at me and I smiled down at him and he made a fist and he said, "I'm going to knock every teeth out of that head." He closed his eyes and died. Fast forward to this year, Pastor Dustin was doing a message. And his message was the difference of fact and faith over faith.
Yep.
And when he did that message, when he said fate, and a lot of times Pastor Dustin does these messages, and it takes me to a place with the Lord, and then I have to go back on Mondays and listen again.
Yep.
So he took me, and fate, and my dad's been gone 22 years.
Yeah.
And the Lord said to me, you have no idea how powerful this is. I'll say another thing. The fate of my life is that no woman has ever lived past 64. I'll be 62 in 3 weeks.
Oh my gosh.
And that's the fate I lived with in my life.
Right.
And when he said that, the Lord hijacked me to my dad and said, "Diane, the commandment of honoring your mother and father is the first commandment with a promise. Read it. I promise you that you will live a long and happy life." And when you went to be with your dad when he died, you broke the curse. And the Lord said,
"Oh my gosh.
And when you go to heaven, you're going to see the restored father that you never had on this side of the earth." Pastor Dustin had a message one day. And he was talking about the power of the Holy Spirit. He talked about your car and the turbo button. And then one year he talked about the stick shift, and I drove a stick. And I like that power and motorcycles. And one day he talked about the Teslas. And I'm sitting there listening. And he's telling all these great features about this Tesla. I take notes when he preaches. And I stopped and I'm thinking, oh, well, that's cool. I'll go buy a Tesla.
Yeah, you need a Tesla.
I mean, I had money in the bank. I'll just go buy a Tesla.
Right, sure. Yep.
I literally had this conversation in my head. And the Lord said, "Hold up. You can go buy that Tesla. But what did I call you to?" I was like, "Oh, that's right." And the Lord said, "Diane, stay focused on what I called you to. I called you to an extravagant level of giving. That's your gift. Yeah, you could buy that Tesla, but that compromises what I called you to." And that's part of why I sold the slingshot and sold the RV. You don't own anything.
Yeah.
It all owns you.
Yeah.
And then fast forward to 1132U, which is a program our church has. And one night a couple of weeks ago, they were talking about word curses. And we had a sheet where you fill out any kind of check everything you've been through. And I had raised my hand that yes, word curses, which of course, dying at 64 is a word curse. You'll never amount to anything as a word curse. When I was 5 years old trying to stir the pot of beans, and my dad would say, "Well, if you stir them with your left hand, they weren't turned out right." He tried to be funny at my expense. And I always felt not good enough being left-handed. So there's so many word curses. the ugly teeth. Always told I was fat, dumb, and ugly.
Oh.
Well, at one point I'm like, well, I know I'm not dumb. So that part's a lie. And then I struggled with the ugly and fat part. You just have to get through that.
Yeah.
Those things that are told to you.
Absolutely.
So Pastor Steve came over to me and he said, Diane, what word curse comes up to you that you just can't get rid of? And I said, well, there's one. When my mom was diagnosed with cancer, my dad's mother was staying with us. And I was taking a bath. I can remember it. Yeah. I was 6.5 years old. So that's how long ago.
Yeah.
And she came in and she pointed her finger and she said, you damn kids. Your mother's going to die and I've got to raise you damn kids.
Oh, no.
And I just remember looking up at her going, I'm sorry.
Oh.
Well, when he prayed over me, I raised my hand when he had a stopping point because we were in a class. I said, Pastor Steve, the weirdest thing just happened. When you prayed over me, I saw my grandmother for the first time. She's been dead 45 years.
Isn't it wild how things can come back?
I said, I felt sorry for her.
Oh.
And I forgave her. While you were praying for me, I saw her as the wounded woman she was. And even though she's been dead all these years, I just forgave her as you were praying. And he said, Diane, that's the evidence of healing.
Yeah. It 100%.
Yeah. But I will tell you the biggest part of generosity is forgiveness. And if people hold on to bitterness.
That's an interesting, let's just pause there. Let's say that again. The biggest part
is forgiveness.
Of generosity is forgiveness.
Because if you're holding on to bitterness, if you're holding on to bitterness, you're being selfish. You don't have a right to do that. And, we all know that if you don't forgive,
you are not wrong on this one. And it's bad news, but you are not wrong.
Wanting someone to be hurt is like drinking poison, hoping they die. We've heard that 100 times, right?
Yep.
But I will say that forgiveness is the biggest gift you can give yourself. Yep. And you're worth it. Yep. And a lot of people don't believe they're worth it. Yeah. But if you can give forgiveness to yourself, forgive God if you need to. Forgive anyone who's hurt you. And really try to see that person the way God sees them. You will live such a generous life. Really.
That is so... I've never heard forgiveness and generosity combined.
Oh, yeah.
As like sisters, But you saying it, I'm like, oh my gosh, that's so true. Because if we live in bitterness, if we live in unforgiveness, then we hold on. Therefore, we're holding on. Therefore, we're self-consumed. We're selfish. We're not letting that. It makes sense.
We're listening to the devil's lies.
100%. Yeah. And so how can we be generous with anything if we're not first generous with the grace that we're, as Christians, required to give? I love that you said it just straight out.
And there's another story.
There's
another story. You have to receive. Part of giving is receiving.
Okay, so talk about receiving. This is great.
We all struggle with whether to give someone money on the streets. And that's just a thing that you and God have to work out. I have been...
It's great wisdom. Yep.
You may say yes today and no tomorrow, and that's okay. I don't think we need to be legalistic about when to give and not to give.
Yeah, that's good.
In that vein, I will say that one year we were at another church and we were heading up the motorcycle ministry. And there was a man going through a divorce and he was singing the blues. He couldn't ride because he didn't have a motorcycle. We bought him a motorcycle. Well, when we did, he had to come clean that he really had 3 motorcycles in his garage. He was hiding from his wife through the divorce. And I felt like a fool because we gave him this motorcycle. And the Lord said to me, no, you did what I told you to do.
Really?
You gave it to him. It's on him and his conviction as to what he'll do with it. And that always made me realize that we don't own the results.
You're so free.
You don't own the results.
You don't own the results. There are so many takeaways from this.
You don't own the result. So another one was, my very first time I was giving, we were at church and my mom had a beautiful wedding ring. And my dad's new wife kept her ring. And I was very upset over it. I'm the only daughter and I wanted her wedding ring. So one year on my birthday, 2 years after my mom died, they gave me the wedding ring.
Okay.
And I had a wedding ring and I took my mom's and wore it on the right hand. So when I did, I had a 16 karat pear-shaped blue topaz that I'd bought as a divorce ring. Well, there was a woman, I won't tell your name, but she goes to our church and you know her now.
Okay.
But back then we went to another church and when I'd raise my hand to praise, they'd sit behind me and she'd always be enamored with that ring. Well, we had a traveling evangelist come who actually was our guide. He was an Armenian little man who took us to Israel.
Oh, wow.
And when Samuel Doctorian came to church, I whispered to my then husband, I said, hey, God's told me to give my ring to this person. And he says, okay. And he runs.
Your mom's ring?
No, the topaz.
The topaz. Okay, got it.
Because God said, don't put your light under a bushel. You'll never wear that topaz ring because you're wearing your mom's ring. You need to give it to someone. See. So he runs home during worship, and we lived real close to the church. He ran home, got it. Well, at the end of the service, it was a Sunday night service. We were walking down the aisle to go up for prayer, and I took that ring, and she was behind me, and I put it in her hand and kept walking. And she just looked at me. So after church, she came. She says, "What is this?" I said, "God told me to give that to you." She's like, oh my gosh, I can't take that. That's just too big, too much. And I said, well, I'm just going to tell you, God said it's yours. And she says, you're not going to believe this. I said, what? She said, my aunt died. And when I went up to Wisconsin, my sister took a ring I was supposed to get. And God told me not to argue over that ring and he would bless me better. And I looked at her and I said, if I avoided a family fight over stuff, then it's worth even more today than the ring itself. And she later made it into a necklace and still wears it to this day.
Oh,
that was the first thing I ever gave away. And I loved that ring.
That was the first thing you gave away that wasn't like money. And you know her to this day. She wears it to this day. And you have this story now. And she has, I mean, it's like,
and she and her sister still talk to each other, which probably wouldn't have happened if you'd have fought over stuff.
And back to forgiveness and trusting God. Oh my gosh. That was the first thing you gave away.
Fun.
Oh, God's economy is so fun. Oh my gosh. Tell me, this is, I love this so much.
Money, the Lord would tell me to like buy a car. And I remember the first car I ever bought was a brand new car for somebody. And we did some anonymous cars through churches we went to. And I could tell you to the penny, every time I made a huge sacrificial gift like that, weird money came out of nowhere and replaced it within a week.
Okay, so help me with this. Okay, there's two questions I want you to dig into. One is people who don't feel like they have anything to give.
You always have something to give.
Okay.
You always have something to give.
Okay. And so that can look like, it's not about an amount. It's not about, what is it about? Is it about a heart that is otherly, would you say? Is it about a heart that's
giving
obedient?
Yourself. It's giving yourself. You're connecting to others. You know, God doesn't want us to be isolated. The enemy wants us to be isolated.
100%.
The enemy wants us to be offended, bitter, unforgiving, divided. Wants us to be isolated, but God wants us to connect.
Yes.
Sometimes I met a man one time in prison doing prison ministries, and he said that when he was in prison and got saved, he tithed his time. So he took whatever the 10th of numbers of minutes in a day, and he read through the Psalms and the Proverbs every day and memorized them.
Oh, wow.
And he tithed his time.
Because he didn't have any money to tithe.
Didn't have any money. If you have no money, can you commit to pray for me over this issue?
Yeah. Oh,
that's a gift. That's otherly.
That's otherly.
And so what I try to do is when people say, will you pray with me? I either pray with them right then, or I'll write back and say, I pray this, especially if they're a non-believer. I'll say, I pray this, and I pray the prayer in writing. And you have no idea the responses I get.
Oh, I can only imagine.
You know, and the thing about receiving, I've got a funny story about that. So I don't know what year it was. It was mid-90s. I was a keynote speaker at an event, and I was going to Fort Worth to the country club to speak for a luncheon. And, you know, I drove the nice car, had the big diamonds, the Rolex watch, the earrings, the whole 9 yards, had on a fur coat. It was like cold, and I was almost out of gas. So I pull off of I-30 at this gas station, probably not the best part of town. And I'm out,
You go on your
Miss
Ming.
thing
Yeah.
here, pumping gas. And this man walks up and he says, "Hey." I said, "Hello, how are you?" He said his name was Michael. I'll never forget his name. I can still see his face. He said, "I need some money to eat." I said, "Okay." And the Lord had already told me, like within the week before that, the Lord said, anytime you give money to someone, always pray with them first.
Okay.
Set the seed.
Love it.
If you're going to plant a seed, till the soil.
Oh.
So I always would say,
plant a seed, till the soil. I love it.
Yeah. So I would pray first and then give the money. And so I said, "Okay." And I'm pumping my gas. I said, "Sure, I'm willing to do that." And he said, "Well, I could hold you up and rob you." I said, "Yeah, you could." I said, "But if you rob from me, you're robbing from God. So you probably don't want to rob from me because I'm a Christian." And he kind of looked at me real funny. And I said, "But I'm going to give you some money. Just a moment. I'm, pumping gas." And I was asking him questions and we were talking. And I said, "Can I pray for you?" And he said, "Yeah." And so I started praying for him. And I finished pumping gas. I'm standing, it was cold. I had on a fur coat. And I prayed over him. And he started crying. And he just looked up and I said, "Can I hug you?" And I hugged him. He had dreads and just, I hugged him. And he said, "Thank you." He says, "My grandmother's prayers have been answered and she's been dead for many years." I said, "Never diminish a praying grandma." He starts to walk off. I said, "Michael, come back. I wanted to give you some money."
Oh.
He goes, no, that's all right. You pray." I said, no, I'm going to give you money. So back then, I would always, the Lord had told me to always put money in my purse for things like that. I had $100 bill. Now, this was the 90s. The $100 bill back then was like $1,000 today.
A lot.
So I put it up and I started to give him the money and I handed him the $100 bill and he jumped back. And he goes, no, I can't take that. That's too much. That's taking advantage. I said, "Well, you can't take advantage of God. And this comes from God." I said, "Don't you think you're worth it?" His shoulders dropped. His head dropped. And he said, "No." I said, "Well, you are worth it. You just received Jesus as your Savior.
You're God's kid now too.
You're God's child.
Yeah,
you're worth it.
right.
The Lord loves you." And he had the hardest time receiving that. And I think that's so funny because sometimes we think a little bit's okay, but when God pours on extravagant, we all of a sudden become prideful because it's pride.
Yeah.
It's pride. And you have to learn to receive extravagantly if you're going to give extravagantly. And I think that's just the biggest thing some people miss. And I remember the first time I had cancer, I was a single mom and the church people wanted to come and clean my toilets. Well, I'm real OCD, real clean freak. And I'm like, they're not going to clean my toilets. And the Lord, and I wasn't even spirit-filled yet. And the Lord rebuked me and said, "You better allow them to bless you." Even then. That was in the 80s. Even then. And so 1987, I said, okay. And it was so hard for me to sit there and let these people clean my house because they didn't clean as good as I would have,
Sure.
That's pride. So the Lord has to chip away when we think we can do it better or we think we're the only avenue to make it happen. Isaiah 46 is so clear in this. I just love that whole chapter because God starts out by saying, "Who do you think I am?"
Yep.
I know the number of hairs on your head. Let me tell you, I'm God.
Yeah.
Who are you? Put you in your place.
Yeah.
And then he says, "What I plan will succeed." And I thought, God's going to do it
either
regardless.
way. Yeah, right.
So I either have a chance to be on
part
board
of it.
and get the joy of seeing it on this side of heaven, or I miss the opportunity to be a part of it.
To be a part of it.
I want to be a part of it because it's really not about the money.
That's right.
The widow's mite.
Yeah.
She gave more than the rest of them.
She gave her whole.
And so I don't want anyone to look at me and say, "Oh, look at you, Diane."
Yeah.
I'm nobody.
Yeah. And you've given a whole lot more than signing a check. Because that's how committed to true generosity you are. It's not about a number. It's not about a signature. It's about that's what I love about you and why I wanted to bring you on here is it's about the heart, the backstage behind all of it is just like, I am here to be a part of what God's doing. And if I have the opportunity to be a part of it on this side of heaven, Like, and I love that you compared your life where you had everything.
Oh, it was horrible. It was horrible.
Yeah, she's making more. She's making more.
I didn't even like
facial gestures
horrible.
over. But yeah, but that's such, because we hear it all the time. You know, like, and the wealthy and the rich and the everyone's unhappy, and it's easy to like be like, well, yeah. There's another story there, or I would be happy, but I would be happy with $1 million, or but I would be happy, you know? And it's like, no. What matters in this life is living generously. And that is what's brought you the most joy.
Mm-hmm.
And that is what has truly, like, you could buy 1,000 Teslas, but what you really want to do is give Michael $100 bill and pray for him. You want to till the soil, you want to plant the seed, you want to go down to Real Options at the Dream Center, and you want to pray with mothers, and you want to bless
little Daquan.
Your Daquan. Yeah.
Daquan.
Oh, Daquan.
Every Monday he comes. He sleeps in our vestibule there.
Oh, he does?
Yeah. And he's my quality control. I can't wait till Saturday to see him because I got him this little...
I don't think I've met him.
Oh, you'll have to meet him.
Okay, make sure I meet him Saturday.
I got these little Patriot Arms, little small packs. And it's, on the inside, it looks like aluminum foil, and it's orange on the outside.
Yeah.
And you put yourself in it, and it keeps you out of the cold and the wind.
Yeah.
So I gave it to Daquan, and I said, I want you to test this. And if you think it works, let me know. And I've showed Casey because we can get $15.
Oh yeah, we can get.
But for the homeless, I mean, I know a lot of what we do at the Dream Center is not homeless, but there is a big homeless contingent.
Absolutely.
And I pray with them, and I give them food I bring my own food and put it in the RV, and just do that on my own. And it's interesting because if you'll ask and get a relationship going, I was taking Progresso soups and crackers that you could lift the can. I was talking to Quan, and he said, no, that gives me diarrhea. If you can't heat it up.
Oh, good.
Who would know?
Who would know?
So he was giving me ideas about
amazing?
So peanut butter is good. Ritz crackers are good. Fruit is good. Things like that. You don't think about that stuff. Yeah, you think, Progresso soup is great. Sure. Well, yeah, if you've got something to heat it up in, but to eat it cold is hard on the digestive system. So you don't think.
You don't, we don't know. Like, we have to be learners still.
I think of someone like Daquan. I take him jackets, and when I clean out stuff and get him things, and I gave him my 1132 sweatshirt. And
awesome.
He's so precious. You know, he doesn't know where his mother is. Yeah. His sister gave him a phone a few years ago and then vanished. He thinks they could be in Dallas. He doesn't have a phone. No family connections. Yet he's kind.
Oh, yeah.
He loves the Lord. He's saved. We talk about Jesus. We talk, about life. I tell him what God has planned for him.
Yep.
And he says, you always give me hope.
Oh, if that doesn't just...
and I'm just a bus driver, I cannot tell you the number of prayer encounters. The trash collector, the city compliance officer. We had a woman that stopped by one day. She was a compliance officer, wanted to know what we were doing. And we got to talking, and she's divorced, and she was married to a guy that was in ministry, and she was a victim of ritual sexual abuse on the altar. And I said, have you forgiven him? And you could just see her bow up.
Oh, yeah.
And I just said, you have to forgive that man. You haven't forgiven him. You will not be free until you forgive him. And I prayed with her. And she comes by sometimes, and she just always, I'm free. And so we know, like, the people that come by and park in the parking lot and take their naps. People take naps in our parking lot all the time. The city workers, and we'll go give them cookies.
That's right. They'll post up. Yep.
Yeah. And so we make Linda, our head lady there. She always makes fresh cookies in the RV, and we'll take them fresh hot cookies if we don't have someone. It's just fun.
It's so fun. The smile on your face and the tears in your eye talking about this type of life versus the type of life where you had all of the things to show. It's like they're polar opposite faces and smiles.
And I have people sometimes that tried me for being busy, and I always correct them. And I say I'm purposeful. When I got divorced in 2016, I promised God I would not be bitter. I would not be a bitter old divorced woman. I've done singles ministries. I don't want to be that. And so I just made a choice that I would have joy, and it was hard. And the other thing is that I would be purposeful in my retirement. I'm not just busy. And I get people who try to tell me to slow down. Well, God didn't program me to slow down. God did not program me to sit on a chair, rock back and forth and go nowhere. The Lord called me to pour into the women in my Connect group and to pour into the people I deal with at the Dream Center and to pour into all my friends and allow them to pour into me.
Absolutely. The giving and the receiving of it all. How do you balance somebody that you feel like you get a sense from, or and I know you already said the outcome isn't our responsibility, so there's a certain element of that, but for people who are like, well, I'm just not going to be taken advantage of. People aren't going to play me. I'm not going to give money because, like, how do you, because I know enough about you to know that you have been a bit used and abused at times.
Well, the first thing you do is you look at what God called you to do.
Good.
Okay.
Back to the basics.
So God called me to be a seed planter, and I know that. So I have planted a lot of seeds in different ministries, different churches, and sometimes I've planted big seeds. Other times I've planted a couple or three sustaining seeds. Sometimes I've found that being generous, it sets up an uneven dynamic that somehow people always think you're going to always pay their way or you're always going to be the one that comes in. And what I've done is I have reassessed my situation in life and I'm focusing on different investments because I'm not getting any younger and I don't want to be a burden to my daughter, but I also want to bless her and see her enjoy things now that she wouldn't be able to enjoy, but for the fact that I'm a giver. And so I have to just reassess and say, you know what? And I've had ministries come to me and I'll say, there's good and good. Both are good. But God called me to this good.
This good. That's so good. It's not a negative and a positive. That's so good.
And it's okay if God didn't call me to this. He'll call someone else.
Well, absolutely.
Because if you really trust God, don't trust me.
100%.
Trust God. And so that's
so
where
good.
Where I am able to not enable and not be taken advantage of or not feel like they only like me because I spend money on them.
Exactly. And you also don't have to get self-conscious about like, oh, do they only, because you're free in every area.
Right.
You just do. And this is what I want to close on. This question is, you've said throughout this whole time, God said, God spoke, God had already told me, I carry $100 bills for this reason. God said, like, God speaking is a huge theme of your life of generosity. How does one start to open their ears to God's prompting in that area?
Read the Bible.
Okay.
Well,
good. That's always a good start.
I can remember, I used to go to the Vineyard Church. It was at Parker and Avenue K. It's now like a different shopping center. But I remember one night coming out and there was a man walking up and I had a plate of cookies and I was scared to death. He wanted money and I wasn't ready.
Yeah.
And I'm like, here, take these cookies. I got in the car, locked the door because I felt ulterior motive. He's going to do something because I was walking in fear.
Okay.
And God said, wait a minute. I didn't give you a spirit of fear. I gave you a spirit of power and love and a sound mind.
Yeah.
Be ready. And that's when the
Be
Lord,
ready.
That's when the Lord said, be ready in season and out of season. You need to always have money that you don't have to fish through your purse to get it. You need to always have a little compartment for that. And the Lord just said, why didn't you take him over here to Long John Silver's and get him some fish? Because there's a Long John Silver's on the corner. I was like, I don't know. So then the Lord was grooming me in that thinking.
Yeah.
And we had gone to dinner and we didn't eat it all. And we had 2 to-go boxes with a lot of food in it. And I saw a man on the street and I thought, let's turn around and go give him this food. We turned the block, came, and he was gone. We looked for him everywhere. And in my spirit, I just felt the Lord say, that was just a missed opportunity. You should have done it when you saw it. Quit thinking about it and do it.
I was not expecting your answer to my question, and I love it so much. I love it so much because when I'm asking like how, like hearing from God and how do you, like, I love that your response, besides reading the Bible, which is always a great idea, everyone, living by the Bible, your response was that God just told you to always be ready.
Yeah.
It's always on your mind.
Who's your neighbor?
Who's your neighbor? You live constantly ready To be generous.
Mhm.
Like, honestly, that is like that is the most free. You've said a lot of like really gold things in this
I
episode.
just want to bless.
But
God's blessed me so much.
Yeah.
I remember you had your feet so messed up because of COVID. And I was so sick from COVID. And I have a lot of the neuropathy in my feet. But I remember trying to find you those shoes, and I just never could find the right pair of shoes.
But you found me a really nice, comfy pair.
But it's so funny. It was like I was on this mission.
Yeah.
I ended up having to settle for the ones you got, the second pair.
And they were great.
The first pair were cute, but they were not what I wanted. and it's like, I just wanted you to have that because I wanted you to be blessed.
Yeah. I would just want to go bless everybody. Like, I just
You do.
Right? Like, and I know so many people listening to this are just going to be like, oh my gosh, like it's just a simple switch sometimes. And we're not bad when we are not thinking all the time about it, but we would be better off ourselves. We would be happier. We would have more joy. We would have more peace if we were to switch on living otherly.
And I would encourage anyone listening to this that's having a hard time in life.
Yep.
These are hard times.
Yeah, they are. Yep.
Gas prices are high. Budgets are tight. Medical conditions come up. You don't know how you're going to go to the doctor.
Yep.
I see it every day.
Yep.
I mean, I just dealt with it with a root canal. That wasn't in my budget.
Yeah. That was yesterday for you. Yeah.
And it's like everybody's got something, right?
Yep.
Things break. Cars break down. Refrigerators break down. And it's hard. And so what I would encourage everyone in that season to find a way to lift up out of it.
Yeah.
Because stuff is always going to break. Things are always going to go wrong.
Yep.
You know, the kids need something, or the car breaks down, or you find out you've got to do this or that, and you don't have the money for it.
Yep.
Something always will happen.
Yep.
Okay, so when you're in that spot, because we always get taken down. So I have this visual of the enemy pulling us into this black vortex. Okay, I'm down in the pit. How am I going to get out of the pit? Well, I'm going to get out of the pit personally for me. I'm either going to call a friend and encourage them, or I'm going to write them a note, or I'm going to send a thank you, or I'm going to surprise them with a coupon to somewhere or a gift card.
I just want everybody to hear this. That's how you get out of the pit.
Yes.
It's not calling a friend to whine and complain, which we all have people we need to talk to. There's nothing wrong with sharing our life situations with people and having support,
and I do that too.
Support groups, and absolutely. But if you really are ready to like get yourself out of like a dark place, you start to live otherly. That's just what you do.
Find somebody to bless, because I guarantee you there's someone better off and worse off
100%
in every situation.
None of us are special in our But we can be special in how we respond to it, which is like, let's live generous lives.
Yes.
You have been a true pioneer and role model for not only us, not only Dee and I, which I already told you, we've like committed to so many more things, like when living generously over like the years that we've known you and seen you do it. But just like, I think so many people, like I'm just believing that every seed you've sown results in, not only is it planted, watered, and it grows, but then they take that deposit and live generously as well.
But if they don't, it's okay.
And that's not our,
because you were obedient. Yeah. You know, and when God took me to that place of realizing taking a stamp off an envelope was stealing, I no more thought that was stealing. I grew up that way, you know? Right. And when I literally, the electricity of that, it was like, wow. Yeah. When you follow God full on, He's going to show you things and reveal things to you that you didn't think were wrong. Spiritually, I think we're not aware as much as we should be, and therefore we're not hearing God. So if you walk in the Spirit of God and you plan your life to be Jesus to others, Jesus is going to be in you. He's going to speak to you. So that's where I come with, well, God told me this or God told me that, because what would God say about that? And it's humbling yourself to know that you're not in control. Yeah. And to be willing to be teachable. Yeah. You know, Paul, he talked about being content in prison, and he said, I had to learn it. Yeah. It didn't come natural. Yeah. We all look at Paul and go, wow, well, he was Saul.
You're right.
He had to learn it. So,
and we do too.
We do too. Yeah. If you can learn to be teachable, and we never quit learning.
No, we don't.
And I miss opportunities still. And I think, I got to do better next time.
Well, We never arrive, but you're doing a really good job on this generosity train, the generous living lifestyle.
I want to say one thing about the kingdom of God.
Do it.
If you invest in the kingdom of God, you will never lose your money. It is the only investment in my entire life that I know comes back exponentially. God's economy, you can never, ever lose when you invest in the kingdom of God. If you get that upside down economy of God in your thinking, you will see exponential returns on anything you do for the kingdom. Whether it's just to show up and wave to people and greet at the Dream Center and remember a name and say, how are you today? Or give your money.
Yeah. Investing in God's kingdom.
It's the best investment you'll ever make.
Amen to that. This was so good.
I enjoyed it. And you know, some people are listening that may not know about our church.
Yeah.
I've been to this church now for 5-6 years, and I've been to a lot of churches. I've been on staff church. I've seen it from both sides. If you want a place where you can serve, 1132 offers something for every person. The people who don't want to be noticed, that want to fill the eggs, like we're going to fill tomorrow for 3,000 eggs. And
oh, sure. Oh, of course you're coming to fill all the eggs.
Of course, we're coming
of course you are. Oh, but my gosh. You never miss an opportunity, do you?
So fun. But there's people that might want to do that.
Yeah, that's so good.
And there's people who may want to stuff envelopes or whatever. And there's people who just want to hand out food or greet the cars or run a camera or get behind a camera and take pictures. There is something for everybody at this church. And there's always a place for someone to serve. There's no off limits.
No.
For any person, any personality style.
Nope.
You know, I'm not into Enneagrams, but whatever they are, there's one for everybody.
Amen. And that's where, and sometimes that can be where people start. Generosity is filling eggs. You may go pay off a house tomorrow, and you may stuff eggs today, and that's why I wanted you here, is because it's a lifestyle.
Whether you're taking a nap or raising the dead.
Amen.
If you're in the will of God, that's all that matters.
Well, we're gonna end on that.